I'm Matthew Buckley Smith, and you're listening to SLEERICKETS, a podcast about poetry and other intractable problems. This week, I'm speaking with Katie Dozier, associate editor of Rattle, co-host of The Poetry Space, along with her husband, Tim Green, editor of Rattle, and the author of the now out from the Poetry Box, All That Glitter. It's a chapbook that won the Editor's Choice Award for 2025. It has just come out this month. All That Glitter. Go check it out now. It's a 40-page chapbook. My copy hasn't arrived yet. I'm just looking at the webpage. 40 pages. That's basically, that's a book of poetry. So check that out. Katie has been someone we've wanted to get on the show for quite a while. I got questions from a number of you, some recently, some like years ago at this point, and we were first trying to set up a conversation, but it finally worked out. I was able to get her for an hour this week. She was a delight to talk to. We mostly just answered listener questions. We talked about Rattle, talked about editing, talked about running the poetry space, writing poems, reading poems. She's very easy to talk to, very funny. She is I told her, and I mentioned on The Secret Show, when I listen to the poetry space, I almost always agree with Tim, but without her, the show would be no fun to listen. Like she's the soul of the show, and she's also the most punchy one. She's the one who's most combative, and she causes the most trouble online, which we get into a little bit at the end. But she's a total delight, definitely a boon for the poetry world as a whole. And I'm guessing most of you are already familiar with her, because I think the overlap between the poetry space and SLEERICKETS is well nigh total. So I'm pretty sure you will enjoy this conversation just as much as I did. This is Katie Dozier, author of All That Glitter from the Poetry Box. It's one of the few podcasts that is about poetry and yet not just pure boosterism, right?
Thanks.
Not just pure, we want to inspire you and uplift you and send you out with a good message into the day, and not just let me read my poems and nothing else for 30 minutes.
There's a lot of bad stuff out there, just true, like unlistenable. Yours is great and I love it, but I can't imagine like some of these, I don't know. To me, the goal is always to make poetry better, and sometimes that's, hey, this is good, and sometimes that's, hey, this is a problem,
Right. I mean, and I particularly am grateful for your the episodes where you'll just pick up an issue of a magazine, and you're not just trashing, you're often praising, but actually considering, like, so is this any good? Which is just like, that's not a question that gets asked very often.
Right, it's not. And then like I used to feel like something was wrong with me if I picked up a lip mag and didn't like it. And
Right.
I want people to know, like, hey, this is okay. Like, I mean,
Yeah. We coincidentally both have chapbooks out. Yours is still shipping, but I'm eager to read All That Glitter. Is that the Merchant of Venice that comes from? All that glisters is not gold.
it's a reference to that,
Yeah.
but
But I know
it's
it's a
actually in
different.
a
It takes it
poem.
in a different direction.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it
Yeah.
does. Perfect. Yeah.
Yes. Well done there. And they are both, because I was also listening to your episode of reading from it and talking about it. Sort of
Thanks.
uncomfortably personal, as in both cases, maybe in different
Yeah.
ways, but yeah.
Yeah, it is true. I mean, that's a part of why I love your book, is it feels like it actually risks something, and very few chapbooks do that, you know?
I'll take it. I'll take it. Um, if it's all right, because I know you have a limited amount of time, but if it's all right,
Sure.
I have a slew of questions from listeners for you.
Awesome. Well,
Um,
that's good to hear.
yeah,
Good.
and I mean, we definitely won't get to all of them, but I thought maybe we could just give it a shot.
Okay, great.
This one just came in today from Coleman, and and so this may be because the chapbook is coming out. You won a little chapbook contest.
Hmm.
That's how both of our chapbooks are coming out. But Coleman's
Yes,
question
yours
is,
slightly bigger than mine, but yes. Yours
uh,
being the biggest chapbook contest. Yes.
yeah, no, I mean that's why I encourage people to enter the route, because it's, you look at it, you see, like, is that right? Am I reading? Am I reading the
I
zeros
still
right?
feel that way when I look at it. So yeah.
Well, you're one of the other things that sets Rattle apart is being is your 19th century mysterious benefactor, as you said, from a Victorian novel, which allows you to be all the things that allows you to be independent in the way that, it feels like poetry institutions now are sort of like it's either a university or there are increasingly these sort of counter current, publications and institutions, but those tend to be either sort of deliberately Christian, deliberately conservative, deliberately they have their own agenda, they have their own mission.
Right,
And
right.
Rattle is almost like a parallel universe magazine. Like it's you just your own world of shit. It's like this is what we like. Fuck all y'all, But except that you have the manner and the sweetness of like Mormons, but you're just your own thing.
I love that. It's hilarious. Thanks for that. It
Um,
does. I mean, it's really important to me to be in a position where we get to just publish the best poems, and that's what we're about. And the truth is that not every place is about that, and that's putting it kindly,
no,
right?
no, totally, totally, yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so
no,
thanks.
yeah. I mean, and that's my complaint about places like Poetry Magazine so often is that I don't believe this is the editor's. I don't believe the editor thinks these are the best poems.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to agree, but like I want somebody there to. I don't. I want this to be your idea of the best stuff,
Right,
and I
right.
and I sincerely
Yeah.
think that with you and Tim. Like, okay, like this is what they really believe in.
Right, right. Well, thanks for saying that. Yeah,
Yeah.
they really care. And, part of it is just we work so full time that it's preposterous, so it really is, we're like about to fall asleep and I'll be like, oh, I think we should do this one thing, like we really pour ourselves into it. So thanks for saying that because it is just like a beyond a full-time job. And I mean, it's a pleasure, but it's also, it's a life commitment is how we see Rattle, so thanks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I believe that. I'm married to a writer, but I know there are pros and cons, but it does seem like in your case, it wouldn't really work unless you were both,
I
both
cannot
both feet in
imagine.
rattle.
I cannot imagine. Like I was, had like a normal quote unquote job, which I've never had in my life. So I can't really imagine that anyway for myself. And Tim's doing everything we're doing. Like we have to both be in it.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. Otherwise, we would feel like we didn't get to see each other enough too, because a lot of times when we see each other, when we're doing stuff, I mean, we're around each other constantly, but we're doing poetry stuff together, which we love. So it's
Yeah.
important.
No, that makes sense. All right, all right. Here's Coleman's question. He says, I know Katie and Tim have been self-publishing lately. I'm curious about her thoughts. Her thoughts about benefits and drawbacks, prestige versus control, exposure, etc., along with any kind of nitty-gritty details like sales numbers.
Okay, great. Well, I love that question. And this is something that for me, I've been thinking about for a very long time because before I was doing this with poetry, I was in poker and I
Hmm.
was involved in standard publishing industry within poker and self-publishing in poker too. And so, what I would say is that for most people, self-publishing is going to be the better way to go about things. I mean, if you do it through Amazon and everyone wants to hate Amazon and do that, and I understand that, but at the same time, they're able to give a percent for self-publishing that other places generally aren't able to get. Now you have to, if you're going to self-publish, the reason in part that Tim and I like it so much is, Tim designs all the rattle covers and all, he works with, as you know, the chapbook winners to make
Yeah,
the
yeah,
covers,
yeah.
but ultimately he's the one designing
Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
everything. So for us, it makes a lot of sense too, because he can do all of that and the formatting and everything. So you do have to take the opportunity to learn the skill. I
Hmm.
did it too for poker books. It's really not that hard to learn how to format something into a good, and you have to pay extra attention, of course, because it's poetry. You can't have like a wonky line in there. But the thing is that in poetry sales, most of your actual money is going to come from your friends and families. It's a rare chapbook that does over 100 copies, which is part of why, it's the Rattle Poetry Prize is so amazing because it goes out to all of our
Yeah.
subscribers. We have over 12,000 now. And so that's why it's really exciting in part. But they just aren't going to sell very many. And it can be kind of demoralizing, honestly, when you release a book out into the world. I did a post about how I'm not doing book shares or book swaps, and people are like, "Oh, you have this book, I have this book from 10 years ago. Let's trade this." And the reason is for that. I mean,
Yeah.
like you're doing, Matthew, you're putting so much out into the world for free out of your own time. And I kind of feel like, it'd be nice if people just, for once I have something for sale, they chose chose to buy it. But But the point is that I think self-publishing is great. I do think that there are valuable contests. There are also not valuable contests. I
Hmm.
chose to enter the Poetry Boxes contest because I really admire what Shauna Bingo Sanders is doing with her small press, and I thought, if I could win that, that's something that would be worth it to me to be involved in, even though I receive less than I would if I'd self-published on Amazon, which I could have done. But I wanted the opportunity to be more involved with Sean and also to promote the Poetry Box because I think it's a great contest. And it's also the way she runs it is interesting because she times it so that you could enter the Rattle Poetry Prize and enter her contest, and then the winner of the Rattle Poetry Prize is announced before the winner of her contest, so you wouldn't have to feel like, oh, I'm, shortchanging myself
Yeah,
out of
yeah,
that
yeah.
contest too. So that was the reason I chose to enter, is because I also thought like, oh, I don't win. I'm giving money to something I believe in. I
Yeah.
believe in what she's doing. She's a good person putting poetry out in a way that I respect. So if you enter the contest, do it because it's somewhere you admire, not because you think you're really going to win, I think. I mean, you want to put forth something you know is good. And
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and that'll get you into the top 70% right there, probably.
Yeah, at least if you have to at least think it's good, which I think, again,
Yeah.
a lot of published poetry, I don't even think the poet thought this was really good.
Yeah, I know. They think like they kind of throw it up in the air. It's like, did you ever see that Pokemon meme with the like random Pokemon butterfly thing? And the person's
No,
like,
no.
the Pokemon guy's like, this is what? And it's like, that's how I feel sometimes it is. When people just put it out like, maybe this is good.
Yeah.
So I
This
wouldn't
I
suggest.
could get this published. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't suggest putting that into the world in any fashion. But self-publishing most of the time is going to be the way. And I think that there's this idea, I think if you get into even a bigger poetry press, that you're suddenly going to sell a ton of copies. And I have not been published with one of those, so I can't say. But my husband's book was with Red Hen Press, and it did not do what he hoped it would do,
Sure.
even with his platform.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I do think self-publishing, we need to get rid of the taboo of it by making our self-published works better and not feel shame in doing that. Just go
Yeah,
about it in a
yeah, yeah.
professional way. Use it as an excuse to learn a skill and experiment. And then what's really nice is you can see all your numbers all the time. You can see, I can log into Kindle Direct Publishing and see how many I've sold with my other books. I can't do that with All That Glitter because that's, with the poetry box. So you lose a little bit of control in that way. And I don't know what my numbers are yet. I am hoping to sell over 100 chapbooks, and that's the level I'm
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about.
yeah.
And I think that that's a little bit of a stretch. I'm not sure if I'll do it, but I would really like to. But that's only in part because I give so much of myself away all the time, to be
Totally. Yeah, yeah,
honest.
yeah,
So
yeah. No,
yeah, but
yeah.
I hope that answers the question. And I love that question. I love the idea of people taking more control over their own publishing, and also consider NFTs. I know they're not the buzzword that they
This
once
is
were.
something you're really into, and I don't, it's just
Yeah.
like baffling to me. But this is, you do poetry in NFTs.
Yeah, poetry NFTs, and they're really cool. I mean, the artist that's displayed on the floor in the Museum of Modern Art in New York right now is Sasha Stiles, who was interviewed in Rattle and had work in the NFT issue of Rattle, which I was in before I worked at Rattle too. And there's a lot of exciting stuff with it. I know NFTs, like I said, the whole crypto thing, it's very tied. So right, if the
Sure,
crypto's
sure.
down, then NFTs nobody's as excited about, but it's a really neat way to get your work out there and something that's different than just a simple digital version. One of my chapbooks is with Alexandria Labs, who's an NFT publisher. And for
Hmm.
example, if you go check out their site, you can collect it as an NFT that's immediately sent to your Kindle. But you own this object that if, in 200 years, people care at all about anything I ever did in poetry, that NFT, could be on its fifth owner and worth money, worth
So,
more than it was paid for.
and so, because I'm so illiterate when it comes to this stuff, is it more durable somehow, and as a digital object, or
Well, it is versus an Amazon digital
right?
because of the fact that it exists on a blockchain. I mean, I believe that technically, Amazon can pull any digital books or they could be gone,
Yeah,
technically. At
sounds
least I've
like something
heard.
they would be able to do.
Yeah, it does seem like they have a lot of power. It does seem
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
But Yeah, and but an NFT, it's an actual token that you own. And there is, a little bit of a market for there can be books, but there also are individual NFTs. So like I have a collection called Crypto, which are just like the first haiku I ever wrote, which I'm not saying I love that they'll exist forever on the blockchain, maybe, which is a little bit of another issue, but something you can do, right? Video poems are exciting. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, there are different ways that kind of feel almost like found poems, where
Yeah, yeah.
you click and you're given a random one of a collection. That's really fun. There's a lot we can do, and I think that thinking about poetry as not just having to exist on the page is something that we need to be doing in 2026, because everything else
Oh,
is
yeah,
changing
yeah.
so fast.
That's how poems get circulated now.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I definitely am not knowledgeable about any of the crypto stuff, but I hadn't thought about it in these terms that there's something like my brother's an artist, and there's the notion that if you're going to make something that you care about, you want to put it on materials that will last, and there's such a thing as like archival paper, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is what you want to publish something on, but so that the
Right.
paper doesn't
Yeah.
deteriorate over time. And it sounds like whatever else it might be, an NFT is to some extent something like that. It's a little more of an intact whole. Okay.
Yeah, it is. And then also too, there's the ability to, imagine if Walt Whitman had been alive during NFTs, I 100% know he would have, with how amazing he was at self-promotion, right? He would have been all about NFTs. And
Yeah.
imagine if you could own an NFT that he originally owned. And it is this whole concept of like, well, what does it mean to own something? And that's something we're facing in our lifetime in
Yeah.
this really unusual, cool, unique way for the first time, basically. At least
Right.
that transference.
But
But
it doesn't. Yeah.
poetry's already changed mediums from being spoken to being written, and
Yeah.
we're, I think, facing the potential for another change of what it means to own a poem.
Yeah. Yeah. That is. I feel like I need to read 7 books and then I'll be able to have this conversation adequately. But yeah, no, I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad to have a slightly different angle on it than maybe I had before. All right, I got a bunch more listener questions.
Okay, great.
This is Chelsea. She's asking. I talked about lazy rhymes. I'm not even sure what I would have meant when I said that, but I've heard Tim say much about setting up expectations, but then breaking them when it comes to metrical variations, and also
Hmm.
maybe favoring unexpected slant rhymes.
Hmm.
And so she's asking, sort of what you make of these variations in meter and rhyme. I mean, and I think another listener wrote in just asking how Rattle looks at the metrical or formal submissions that come in, because a lot of my listeners are formal poets, and
Hmm.
your Rattle is not a formal magazine, but you are sincerely open to formal poetry, which is not the norm.
Yes. Well, I would go so far as to say we're more than open to it. The reality is, because I do hear a lot like, oh, you guys don't really publish formal poems. First of all, the Rattle Poetry Prize winner this year, Maury Creech, it is a formal poem, a
Yeah,
Meredithian sonnet.
yeah,
And
great poet.
I would say, excluding for when I do a prompt that's asking for formal poetry, in which case I do get more, or we have something that's like something actually literally requesting it. Our general submissions are probably like 5%, if that, formal poetry. We
Mm,
get sent very little in comparison, to just free verse. And of course, fans of formalism, I think, would have a smart way to answer that. It's easier to write, right? It's easier to bullshit a
yeah,
free
yeah,
verse
yeah,
poem than it is, and
yeah,
let's
yeah,
just
yeah.
call it what it is. There's a reason that even a lot of well-known free verse poets can't write a formal sonnet. Like, this is something I'm working on in my own craft radically right now, because I think it's a real problem that it's taught as little as it is. It's baffling to me
Yeah.
that it is, and we need more formalism. We need more formal poems. And Chelsea McClellan is great asking that question, because she was schooling everyone. We have a Rattlecast prompts group. And so we were all talking about sonnets this week, and she was just mic dropping like left and right on it, because she's amazing and she's an incredible formal poet. So first, I would say submit more formal poems to us. So I would
Yeah,
say
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
would say that, and then for me, when I read a poem, it's always trying to enjoy it and then trying to break it down. Now I can't help that I'm trying, half of my brain is shifting to breaking it down and like what's going on here? Is this formal?
Mm,
Things like that at the same time. But like I think more often than not it results in a stronger poem. And that's just the reality of it. And that's, I pretty much I think how Tim feels as well. We want more form. We think it's excellent. So please send it. And I mean, but I love slant rhyme too. My own writing is it's interesting because I've started going through and scanning my free verse poems, and I've found that I have these really consistent metrical patterns in them
yeah,
that I
yeah.
just I hadn't been thinking about. And thinking about it is important. So I mean I love slant rhyme. If a poem doesn't have music, is it a poem? I don't know. When we publish poems, often a thing is, oh, I really like what's going on in here, but the music, I want more. And it doesn't mean every poem we publish is perfect. We don't get enough perfect poems sent to us for that
Yeah,
to be the
yeah, yeah.
case,
Right.
but it does mean that it has a lot going for it for sure.
Yeah. I read and enjoy a lot of free verse poetry as well as formal poetry. I do wonder sometimes about that question of what's free verse poetry being easier to write, and my thought is you should write whatever kind of poetry you want to write, but if you never ever write in form, then if you want to be the best poet you can be, then that should be because you choose not to, not because
Oh, totally.
you're not able
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
Totally. And I mean, if it's like, I always think about Picasso before he painted the paintings we all think of with Picasso.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He learned all the technique to paint, whatever the equivalent of photorealist paintings were in his day.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he
Yeah.
could do all of that. And it's only because he could do all of that that his free verse, so to speak, was interesting. Not that all of it was successful. Uh,
No, no, right. Yeah, but
but
for
I
sure,
totally
yeah.
agree. Know what you're doing, and the reality is that a lot of it I think stems from just laziness.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
That's true for Jackson Pollock and Mondrian as well.
yeah,
All of them had, enough classical training that they were competent, realistic painters.
right,
Um,
right, and chose to break off. So, and that's yeah, it's important. It really is, and I think it's a shame that even I think about Billy Collins, and I don't know if it was when he was on the poetry space or where it was he said this, but I mean he's very aware of specific meters that go on in his poems or what like he's
yeah,
very
yeah,
much he
yeah,
sees it, even though he's the last person I would think of when I think of that kind of a thing, where his poems rely on his openness and his wit and his observations. But that's he's very aware of syntactical rhythms at least going on in his poems. And yeah, we need to teach it.
yeah,
I don't know. I can't believe that it's not just being taught in every MFA program rigorously. Like what
yeah. Yeah.
else, so
What else you do? What else you
what are you
teaching,
doing
man?
for that
What do you
amount of
got?
time?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I do. I mean, my experience is, I think, it's similar to yours in that I wrote exclusively in free verse poetry for a while, and I find it very difficult to do that now. Partly because I think I was writing by ear, and by
Yeah.
ear turns out to mean sort of metrically, but you're not really aware of it. And so
Right.
then once you learn it, you can't go back to that vague,
Right.
half aware,
The innocence.
intuition. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
That's very true. But also too, I mean, I think um one of the huge benefits to me is if I know, like I have a vague, maybe it's an image, maybe it's a vague start to a poem, something I want to explore. It's so wonderful to be able to say, oh, I want the repetition in a villanelle for this. That feels right for these
Yeah.
reasons,
Yeah.
and being able to pull a form because it makes sense is wonderful because that's how every poem should be, whether it's free verse or haiku or anything in between.
Yeah. That's I'm trying to retrain my ear right now to write in sapphics just because I,
Wow.
I would like to have that as a tool. And I think it
Yeah.
takes, I think it just, as with, iambic pentameter, it takes like a lot of practice to sounding like total dog shit before it
Right.
starts to be
Right. And
anything,
people don't like that, right?
yeah.
It's if you reach a point where you can write a decent free verse poem with your eyes closed, basically,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
lot to be like, I want to learn a whole new meter and be able to think in it. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Auden says like that moment when you know you can do whatever kind of poem you're doing with your eyes closed and you know how it's going to work out, that's the moment you're cooked. That's the moment you're no longer writing poems that are worth publishing. That's that's Auden,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, good thing I'll never reach that point.
Yeah, yeah. That's yeah. It's like that's how I feel when I hear poet complaints about what happens when you get too famous. You're like, oh well, thankfully this is not my concern. Um,
Yeah.
I had an email from Stephen, and this is sort of a provocation as much as a question. But I
Mhm.
had complained on the podcast about uh, I I have a strong dislike of
Mhm.
rejections that involve critique.
Uh-huh.
Like if somebody's going to reject something I'm writing, fair game, totally. We all get
Right,
rejected all the
right,
time. But if you're going to
right.
reject it and say like, "Oh, and I didn't," here's what I didn't like about it, that makes me irate. I hate that.
Yeah.
But he wrote back to say that he finds that often very, very valuable,
Mm.
and that he finds that there's not enough sincere, honest feedback. And so
Hmm.
when somebody's rejecting your poem, you can at least trust them to tell you the truth. I have some I have some qualms with that logic, but I think he wanted to hear kind of because he was saying that you and Rattle do critique of the week and these things, and so I thought it'd be kind of an interesting problem to put to you because I know you do these things and you also have an enormous amount of I mean Rattle just receives such a crazy flood of submissions that you've got to
Right.
think about this and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
definitely. So I'm not the first reader for any category besides the prompt category. And that one I'm the only one who reads it and I pick it and do that. But
the
so I'm not
prompts.
dealing with I'm
Yeah.
not the one sending out generalized I mean I look at a general submission that might be published. At that point I get involved with general submissions. But I love this question because I can relate to both sides of it. So to relay a brief anecdote, I submitted some Hyben somewhere and I got what I thought was an incredibly condescending response to this. That was like, and I'm
Did you
not going to
realize
say
part of your
where.
poem was in prose?
I'm not going to say, I'm not going to say where, but I'd also heard that this editor had given someone else a a rejection that was like condescending and rude. So my when I feel like I can defend people, that's when I get really dangerous, right? It's not really about me. So I got this rejection, and it was like, and the rejection even said like, have you considered publishing your haiku first in Modern Haiku and Frog Pond? And I've been in there multiple times. So this was very like, but anyway, what I did was I wrote him back and I was like, look, I don't think that this is your intention, but I send a lot of rejections and this is really condescending. And like I went through and I was polite, but I was like, just like, because also too, this was somewhere that I tell people sometimes when I get a Hyben that I can't take, hey, you might want to send your Hyben here, you
Mm.
know? So like I cared because I was sending people to slaughter with these kind of things. And he wrote back and he apologized and said, I didn't see it that way. Thanks. Thanks for telling me. Because nobody had ever just said, like, hey,
Yeah,
you're coming off like a jerk, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I have been many times tempted just to write a one-line email back saying you can just say no.
Right. Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
then the
that's
other
I'm
side to that.
gratified to know that you did that and it was it
Right.
was received at least
Right.
with some
Yeah.
understanding.
Well, to me, when it crossed the line of being like, I don't think you really know hype, and I love the Japanese forums community. Sometimes there are some people that bristle a little bit because I threw myself into it so quickly. And I
Hmm.
do think there's a little bit of, I've been writing haiku for 50 years. What the hell do you know about it? And
Right,
don't get me
right.
wrong, I'm not saying I'm the authority on writing haiku, but I am saying I know how to do it and I poured
Mm.
myself into it. But
Well, it's just
anyway,
yeah, it's like if you're I don't know, it just feels like a weird attitude to
it
have.
was a very weird
Yeah.
attitude, and I think the important thing and why I wrote it was because I didn't want other people to experience that. Now, for the rejections that I send, which you're supposed to say declines, but we
Oh,
know they feel
okay.
like rejections, that I send for the prompt category, what I do is if someone was really close, like what I have
And
with,
sorry, just if anybody's not aware, Rattle does
sorry.
a offers a prompt. Is it every week or every month?
Yes, every week. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. And then what I do too is now, because we have the invited prompt lines, if they submit it, so we give it at the end of the Rattlecast on Monday, and they have until Sunday night to submit it, and then I pick around 10 poets to share that brand new poem for the invited prompt lines, which is the second half of the Rattlecast now.
Mm.
But anyway, at the end of the month, I pick a poem to publish, and oftentimes I also recommend other poems for print publication. So usually in an issue of Rattle, there are at least a couple other poems that were actually originated as prompt poems, which is fun too. Because
Yeah,
if I
yeah,
love a poem, I will suggest it. And sometimes it's not the best fit to be the prompt poem of the month if like it spins a little too far off the prompt where I'm like a little bit like, did this really inspire it or is this just an
right,
excellent poem?
right.
That kind of a thing. But anyway, at the end of the month, I send personalized rejections, but I do it with a few criteria. One is that it's someone who's submitting a lot to me generally
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
feel like
yeah.
they're more interested in kind of what I might have to say. And I also try to do it to really highlight something that I think the poet is great at and to say, I love this part about the poem. And it's extremely rare when I say, um, I think the poem would be stronger if you made this change. And I only do it if one, again, they've been submitting for a while and they've been close. And I think it's a systematic issue that the poet needs to maybe find a way to work through that I think would really get them to the next level. And they're the kind of poet that clearly wants to do that. So those are
Mm.
and I still like hesitate to do it,
Sure, sure.
right?
Yeah,
Because, and I don't want it to be, my opinion is my opinion. I think it's well formulated and well researched, but
right.
of course it's an opinion,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
keeping that in mind. But I try to walk that balance, and then occasionally I'll make a post that's like, how do people actually feel about getting personalized rejections? And anyone that replies that's like, I don't like it, I like actually have a list so that I don't
Oh,
accidentally
that's
send
great.
them a personalized
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
rejection when
yeah.
they would rather not know. Because I also do
Mm.
tiered rejections because, I'm competitive. This is what I would want if I was submitting to my own category, you know?
Right, right, right. So you do personalized rejections for every submission to the
No,
prompt, or just for the
I
best
get over
of? Yeah,
500 a month for
yeah,
that
yeah,
one
yeah, yeah. The
category, and
best, yeah.
that's like not even half the reading I'm doing a
And
month.
that's
So.
more than a lot of poetry magazines get for their general submissions. So
Right,
yeah,
right. So I do it when I feel very confident it would be helpful, and I'm knowing I'm still going to be wrong some of the time,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it's
But
never
that's
like
yeah.
this was wrong in your poem,
Right,
something
right, right. Yeah.
stupid.
Well,
Yeah.
like one of my kind of principles personally when it comes to critical feedback is that I want that conversation to be happening inside the boat, right? Like if you're
Right.
kind of in it with me in some sense,
Exactly.
then I'm
Yeah.
game. Let's talk about it. But
Yeah.
if you're just sort of sailing by and firing something off, then I feel like, well, you have
Yeah.
no investment. You don't like. Why should I trust anything you have to
Right.
say?
Yeah.
But it
No,
sounds like this is
totally.
the prompt. This is happening within a community of people who listen to the Rattlecast.
Right.
A lot of them are repeat submitters.
Right.
You have some sort of existing
Right.
relationship with
And I
these people.
care. I
Yeah, yeah,
definitely care because also too, honestly, I wouldn't send a personalized rejection to somebody I didn't care
yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah,
That's it's a choice of my time at that point. I am not paid more because I submitted that personalized rejection. I just
yeah,
spend
yeah, yeah.
a little bit more time doing it. And you're right, that is the difference because like I got the journal I probably most want to be in is 32 poems and I got a very nice and I was thrilled to get a personalized rejection. Like it actually felt like, wow, great. Like I am one jump away from an acceptance if I can get a
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
personalized
yeah.
rejection. And it was, well said. I like the idea of saying this was our favorite in the submission when it's that kind of a submission. I think that that's good. The important thing, like you're saying, is be in the boat with the person, be
Yeah,
on their side. Like, and I'm rooting for everybody to get published. That's
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
decent
yeah.
person.
Yeah, no, no,
So,
that's yeah. Yeah, you are. It's funny because you are a like working for the good of poetry person in a way that probably more than I am.
I don't know about that.
But you're
Anybody
not.
who
Yeah,
commits to a podcast is doing something.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's also this is a heavily Schadenfreude colored podcast. But yeah, part of what I appreciate about your approach to boosting poetry is that it's not all one note and it's not indiscriminate.
Thanks. I
Yeah.
appreciate that because I do sometimes I feel bad disappointing people, Like I knew that the shift to having the prompt lines be invited was gonna hurt some people's feelings, And but the reality is too, what we're keeping in mind with that is that it's not only the people actually sending the poems and getting involved, it's our viewership. And since we made that change, our retention is way higher. So
Yeah.
more people are actually listening to the poems that are the ones that, I've done kind of like a soft select on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. And there's sort of there are more ways of this is the sort of thing I'm not at all good at thinking about. Like there are more ways of engaging with the program, and so people have
Right.
these
Right.
varying levels of
Right,
investment.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
some people just want to hear poems. I think we really need to think more in poetry about the people who are actually consuming it without producing more of it themselves, right? Like
Yeah.
we need to think more about that audience and how to make life interesting for them too, I think.
Yeah, yeah. As I think I've said elsewhere, like people who read but don't write poetry are like unicorns in the swinger
They really
community, right?
are.
It's like
We need to
holy
roll out
shit.
the red carpet for them. Like
Yeah, 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 for sure. You're always readers welcome. And you want to say the word the Rattlecast is it's a weekly YouTube
Mhm.
it's done live, but then it's also recorded and you can watch it
And then it,
later.
yeah,
And
yeah,
this is sort of it's a rolling reading that Tim hosts with these different features in it, as well as a kind of an interview
yeah,
section.
yeah.
Are there, 'cause so I've done it once, I'm going to have to do it again coming up. Are there things that are you, there things you all have goals for, or are there things you kind of hope for or cringe at? Because I'm always interested in sort of how people think about their own programming that way.
Yeah, well, we continually try to update things to reflect, the changes and the changes in our environment. I mean, a big shift is that we are getting rid of print interviews in the next issue of Rattle, so that's
Okay.
a very big shift. And what we did instead is I'm doing a section called Still Lifes, as for Still Life, and the first one's on Ted Kooser, and Tim and I flew out to Nebraska so that we could go to his farm and I could photograph him. And we care so much about this that, Rattle, we're a really small nonprofit. We couldn't ask for $2,500 for this trip, so we were paying for it ourselves.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how strongly I feel about this section because the goal is to take a poet who's older and contributed massively to poetry and really celebrate them. And furthermore, to have a bunch of new poems from that poet, from these poets that are still writing excellent poetry, into their 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so Ted Kooser is definitely one of those people. The poems he has in the new issue are excellent, and I'm pretty happy with the photographs. But that was it. And then I have a little essay in there, but just like 500 words because we didn't think people were really reading the print interviews. Plus, we have the Rattlecast, so it
Yeah.
felt like we have a lot of interviewing format, and that photography would be something we could really add to elevate these poems even more a little bit because I am interested in photography. My dad was a photographer, so I've, been doing that for a while too. So that's
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
shift. And then, yeah, we're always trying to constantly evaluate. I mean, the shift to the invited prompt lines, that was something we thought about for months. And then I did ask people to weigh in because I didn't want anyone to feel like cut out of it
Right.
you know and so that shift means that there's a little bit of a competitiveness, which is a slight, I don't know, I'm a competitive person, so I don't really view that as a negative, but I understand some people do, right? And we're talking about the
Yeah.
arts and everything, but I think it's been a really good shift. So yeah, we are constantly evaluating that kind of a thing, and trying to make things better and more interesting and more engaging for everybody because that's our mission statement is to promote the practice of poetry, and so that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I am like I sort of love the idea that because it's got to be an unusual experience for a senior, celebrated laurel, elderly poet to hear like, well, we flew out here. We want to take high quality photographs of you. Oh, do you have any questions? No, we don't do interviews anymore. But it's
Yeah,
a nice, a little nice contrast. Not
it
what I'm
is a
used to.
little bit. Yeah, I mean, like, as we could. I mean, well, too, in Ted Kooser's case, he has complications from cancer, and so
Hmm.
he cannot speak at like
Oh,
he
I
once
didn't know
could.
that. Oh,
No,
wow.
I know, and so
Yeah,
that's. I mean, not everyone, of course, is going to be like that, but it did have that benefit in terms of being able to reach him more,
yeah, yeah,
than
yeah.
we would have perhaps otherwise. But
And that makes going there in person all the more valuable
yes,
for
yes,
his. I
yeah,
mean, yeah, it's something for he needs to appreciate in a way that
yeah,
is felt that people still
right,
care about him. Yeah,
right. And I mean, I thought it was a good idea before we went, and not to toot my own horn too much, but like, I don't know, that concept of terroir and wine, and how the wine tastes exactly like where the grapes are grown and
yeah,
everything.
yeah, yeah.
And it's feeling like being on his farm. It felt like being in a Ted Kooser poem. It felt like
Yeah,
deja vu in this weird way because obviously I read all of his poems again, like leading up to being there, and I really think it's gonna like offer people the chance to think about their own environment where they're creating their own poems too, because I'm big on like creating the environment that helps the result you want in your life. So
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting and I'm excited about it. So,
Yeah.
and it's coming out with your chapbook, which is all, it's going to
Oh
be a
wow.
banger time for Rattle coming to
Oh
everybody because
man.
it's your chapbook and yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I'm excited. And as corny as it is, I definitely felt that. I know other people have said so at the going visiting the Frost Farm that I feel
I
like
haven't.
you go there and you think like, oh, this is a bad farmer who wrote great poems lived here. Like this. Like I
That's
get it. I feel this.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is humanizing in a way too, right? Because there's this way where we can like exalt people who've had all this success, we're poet laureates and everything, and then like, everybody's bad at things too, not,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
And I should
Lot.
say that the next person we're doing is Rena Espaillat.
Oh
So
wow.
we're
Yeah.
going to her house in the
Oh,
Boston
that's
area.
wonderful. Yeah.
And
Does
that's wonderful too because
yeah.
we had a technical issue very sadly because I was so excited about her being on the Rattlecast because she is, I think you can make a really, really easy case for who is the best woman writing poetry today in English,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
possibly in Spanish too. I don't know it well
Right.
enough to
Yeah.
say for sure. And Rena would be right there. So anyway, we'll get the photos. We'll
Yeah.
see if we could redo the Rattlecast because there were technical things with her. But I'm not totally sure if we can, if that's realistic or not. But anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like this at this point she's yeah she's a treasure, and but sort of there's it is remarkable how clear and sharp and funny she is at an extraordinary age that I don't yeah
Yes, yes. Her new book is amazing.
yeah yeah
It's
yeah yeah
amazing. Yeah.
yeah the last reading we did an online thing with her, and there were poems of
Oh,
hers I'd never heard or read before that were pretty
yeah.
remarkable. All right, Ethan sent in 9 questions, so we're
Way
definitely
to
not going
go,
to get to all of
Ethan.
those. Yeah,
Yay.
but we can get to some of them. Um, he this is a this is a typical Ethan paragraph question, but he says, I'm glad that Rattle emphasizes that there's good and bad poetry, not just Rattle. I think he's especially a big fan of the poetry space. I know that
Oh,
I
thank
think
you.
like that's his biggest point of engagement.
Thank you.
Yet I've never heard them clearly explain how one might tell the difference exactly, other than developing taste, which is mostly subjective. Do they believe in a Taoistic C.S. Lewis sense that in art as in all things there is a foundational good and bad? It's like a natural law, I guess, and subjective judgments are at times either closer or at all times either closer to or further away from understanding the Tao, I think the poetic Tao, or is it a little more relativistic or consensus or something else?
I would say that I believe the quality of a poem is a lot less subjective than people want to pretend. I think that most people that say it's super subjective are the kind of people that tend to think that all poems are of equal value. Some are not better than others, and that's not how I see it. I don't like to breach to speaking directly for Rattle to that extent,
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah,
because
yeah.
that is
You can
my
speak for the
own.
poetry space. Yeah.
Yeah, for the poetry space, I do believe that there are many like it's sort of like I don't know. I've been thinking about what percent is the craft and that level, and then there is a little bit that's like I'm going to enjoy this poem more because it has a great poker metaphor, and I was a poker player for a super long time. So I do think though that you could break a poem down objectively. I actually was thinking it would be really neat to somehow create a program that did this where you could almost judge the quality of the poem based on the craft that's in it before even reading it. I think that would maybe be something that would be possible, which I know is crazy. But if you can look at the level of craft, now craft can be overdone too, right? You can lose the
Mhm.
soul of a poem and it still be a well-written poem, which is a lot
Mhm.
of what comes out of academia, to be frank, are poems like that. So I think that there is this idea that it's subjective if a poem is good or not entirely. I really disagree with that. I tend to argue more for the opposite just because I think it's the understated voice. It's the voice that needs to be considered more, that you can judge a poem pretty objectively up to a certain point.
I think of like Greg Williamson like to say, you get no points for doing it right, but there is such a thing as doing it right. Like that you're talking about evaluating basically the competence of a
Hmm.
poem
Hmm.
before even getting to, and so then what does it do after having been written competently?
Right, right, as a baseline for it. I think I think you can, and this idea that I mean, the thing is there are always poems that are the exception to that, right? I mean, but they always fit the container. Like I'm trying to think, you could make a program that would judge the economy of language, right? Like the if something is stated more than once, which is probably an
Right, right,
indication
right.
that it's too wordy. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you need the beginning of The Trouble with Poetry by Billy Collins that begins with the same title because the whole point is that poems multiply and do that. So he's making a joke,
Right,
right?
right.
And so
Yeah,
that's an
yeah.
exception. But for the most part, I think it's less subjective than people want to believe. Like Matt, I tend to think if you and I were tasked with like we're gonna read the same 100 submissions and we're gonna rank
Yeah.
them, I feel very confident like if we were like we're gonna put the top 20% in this pool, that you and I would have very similar top
Yeah, 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 yeah.
20%.
In crass terms, this is what I call the blowjobs feel good theory of subjectivity. Like, subjectivity is real, but like there are certain things humans tend to respond to in fairly
Right.
predictable ways, and poetry may not be completely exempt from that phenomenon.
Oh, that's great. Well, we'll just put that in the about section on our nonprofit. We'll be done.
Oops. Yeah. Yeah, I've my friend Helen is working on nonprofit stuff, and yeah, it's illuminating what you have to get figured out to do something like that.
Yeah, it is true.
What is out of curiosity? What is because you have to like the idea is that a nonprofit has to can't really be doing things that are outside its stated mission.
Hmm. Hmm.
What do you just try to make your mission as broad as possible to
I think
accommodate
that's why
anything you might
Tim,
want to
yeah,
do?
because Tim came up with it long before I was involved. So we have that. And then we, stay with the founder who, right now Tim's at an editorial meeting with the founder, with Alan Fox, who, is very much involved in the final selection process of the poems. So.
Okay. All right. So here's another. This one is interesting because Ethan wrote this in before we had that whole conversation. So Stephen Searcy published that piece about
Hmm.
eliminating poetry or reducing poetry's feedback loop.
Hmm.
You had some exchange on the comment section of that article, and then we all corresponded some, and then he and I
Right.
recorded an episode talking about it.
Hmm.
This question sort of touches some of those same points in a way that, yeah, I'm kind of curious how it may read differently today. Ethan says, in the discussion of after poems, this is on the poetry space, uh, Tim and Katie come down pretty hard on the idea of taking things from other poems and poets as calling this plagiarism. Yet, in pretty much every healthy poetic culture in history, poets are just constantly stealing from each other in their poems. In some traditions, it's even necessary to do so. He refers to classical Chinese and Japanese poetry. I know that in that conversation about the poetry feedback loop, hip hop came up as well.
Hmm.
He says, why is it so important today to carefully avoid stealing or plagiarism when this was not a significant concern in the past?
Well, I would say, first of all, just because it wasn't being done in the past doesn't mean that it was right. So I would take that issue, to
Yeah.
be honest, Ethan, with that logic.
Okay. Just because Wyatt was stealing Tasso poems on credit, or who's it? Was it Johnson stealing Tasso poems? I forget. No,
Yeah.
Sydney. It was Sydney stealing Tasso poems. Yeah, uncredited doesn't mean it was okay.
Yeah, and so the way I see it with that is just it's something we need to do better at. I think that it's a lot better if we say okay, first of all too, I have to say in submissions, it's like I read a poem and it says after and then a poet that I don't know every poem. I've like vaguely heard of them, but this isn't like an after Ada Limon or something
Yeah,
situation.
yeah,
Like and I have to figure out like is this a whole poem rewritten? In this, I have to find the source poem because I
right,
have to
right,
know
right.
how close it is to
You
the.
just see after, and it's an assignment to read two poems instead of
Yeah,
one.
exactly. It is. So first of all, that's my first bias. But second of all, like Ethan, it probably sounds like you're someone who's borrowing in a healthy way and like, reaching somewhere different. But the example I like to think about too, just because it's literally the poem that I gave this the most thought about, is that the last poem in All That Glitter is what
Hmm.
I call a sequel.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
an
It's the
after poem
good bones.
after
Yeah,
after Good Bones, yeah. And so that poem, it's really close to Good Bones. That's why I call it a sequel because I want it to be like this is very related. But
yeah,
why it's okay to me is because A, it very clearly indicates the poem that
yeah,
I'm talking about, and B, I spin off and feel entirely different about the world than Maggie Smith does in Good
yeah,
Bones.
yeah, yeah.
And the problem with after poems is it's people think they're doing something different. And a lot of times they're just not. They're doing a shittier, excuse me, version of the same poem. I was in an MFA program for a while before I left, and that was something that came up in workshops again and again. And I would just be like, I think that this is wrong. Politely, I would say this because the poet wasn't trying to be, but you can't just rewrite the poem with a hippopotamus family instead of a normal family, and it's a different poem. It's
Yeah,
one thing to be
yeah,
inspired, and it can be a good exercise, I think, to like reimagine the same poem, but don't try to publish it, I think.
yeah. Part of
Yeah.
the difficulty with after as a tag is that it means 500 different things.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I did that with a Joshua Megan poem, but it was
Hmm.
really like basically like the use of the title as a tenor and the poem as a vehicle with regard to
Okay.
addiction. But
Well,
but
that's
everything,
yeah.
but again, like as you said, after can mean this is a lightly edited Xerox of the original. Yeah.
Right, right. And so that's the thing. So I think we need to be more comfortable giving credit to people too. I think it's a real problem in poetry, that we aren't quick to. I mean, something that comes up for me and kind of hurts my feelings is that with the prompts I give, sometimes, they're prompts anybody could have come up with or whatever, but sometimes, I give real amount of thought to like
Yeah, yeah.
what is and what I'm actually doing with the prompt is I'm looking at my submissions and I'm like, how could everybody do better right now? Like, what is something that would make us write better? And so
Yeah,
for
yeah,
this
yeah.
week, I noticed that the verbs people have been sending in are pretty boring verbs. And the poems are not feeling as alive because of that. So I did a verb prompt. But my point is, in terms of credit too, I do wish people more often would say, like, hey, this was Katie's prompt, publicly. It's like a secret kind of with prompts even. And it
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
need to
yeah.
be because we should share our sources of inspiration, whether it's you write a poem that you read a poem and it inspires you to write another poem that's totally different, and you're posting it on your social media. You can just say, "Oh, I was reading Maury Creech,
Yeah,
and I was
yeah.
really inspired to try my hand in Meredithian sonnet." Like people want to know that anyway, so share our inspirations,
Yeah.
I guess. But I like the question, Ethan, and I like how you word them too.
Yeah. So, with possibly the exception of this one, I thought a good closer would be his like, most pointed question, which is sort of funny. I mean, sort of like I think it's sort of tongue in cheek, but he says, "Katie has said publicly and regularly that she is now married. Congratulations to
Thank
the
you.
best." That's his congratulations, but I echo it. Yeah.
Thank you.
To the best poet in the world. What is her justification for this claim beyond that she is biased?
Well, my justification is that I went to the Yeti store and I had him created an etched mug that proclaims he is the best poet in the world.
The mug proves it.
The mug proves it. Well, it's a pretty easy case to make, to be honest, in all seriousness. Having thought about it logically with how long Tim's been the editor of Rattle, and for a long time, he was reading every submission. Given that we live in 2026, where sending a poetry submission is as easy as it is, he has read
Hmm.
more poems than any person alive. And I can say that very comfortably from the submissions. We thought about it, and he's read like, I don't even remember what the number was we came up with, which was me saying it, by the way. Tim's not like some narcissist. It's like, I wonder how many poems I've read. Like, I realized he probably had at the
Yeah.
same time because I was thinking about numbers someday, and I was like, I mean, he's read probably 5 million poems.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. And
You get like a quarter million a year, is that
a
right?
250,000 a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
No, Tim needs a hype man. That's what you're helpful for
I want to
that.
be, I'm trying to be the hype man. And so he has the mug, so that's half the battle. But that, and then, I've had such constant in-depth conversations with him about poetry. And what's interesting is him and I write a lot differently, right? And he is more on the formal side, which I think is wonderful and I envy and I love. But like truly just allowing a poem to exist, and the sort of cadences and sonic rhythms that he can come up with. And then also on a more gushy note, it's crazy to look back at the poems that we were writing before we knew each other. And it was like we kind of existed to each other in this weird way. Like if you look at his first book and there's a poem called The Body. It never made sense to him, but he let it exist. And for me, I guess like I love that he can appreciate the beauty in something without 1,000% having to understand it. Whereas like I will break anything down until I feel like I understand every aspect. But my point is, and this is going to sound like I'm crazy and Ethan will never listen to Poetry Space again, but I think that the absolute best poets have a truly prophet-like ability to see the future somewhat, and I see that in Tim's poetry.
Tim's like the receiver of memories of the poetry world.
Oh
You
my
know?
God, I love that. Yes.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
too much has passed through him. He's
He really has.
accumulated
Yeah.
wisdom beyond
Yeah, well, you can
human
see why
capacity.
too. I'm always hounding him to somehow find more time to write.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Which is hard, but
I was curious because I there was something you said offhand in the when you were reading from the chapbook because your first poem was published in Rattle was a
hmm.
Poets Respond poem. So in
Yep.
addition to the prompt, you do a sort of a standing invitation to write about something that's a current event of the moment.
Yeah, and that was predated me. That was my first publication, exactly.
Yeah,
Before
yeah.
I knew Tim, to be clear, Ethan.
Okay, so this which was because there was something you said when you were about submitting a poem and you were nervous, but maybe you were speaking in this sort of like figurative psychic way, but you said something like, "I think I was in love with you before." And I thought, wait, were you like, in addition to being somebody who knew Rattle before him, were you somebody who had sort of like a parasocial relationship with him before you got to know him
I mean,
personally?
it wasn't long before I submitted that time because I didn't wait long, but I mean, I saw the first, so I became aware of Rattle because I was like, I want to start actually submitting my poems. Like I haven't been writing. I went to college,
Yeah, yeah.
years ago. I haven't submitted a poem. So I then found Rattle and I saw him live for the first time on Rattlecast, and like he had no idea I existed. And I instantly was like, oh my God, like, I feel like I'm in love with him. And like, it was crazy. It was so crazy,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's so
yeah.
embarrassing kind of to say that out loud. But he didn't know I existed. And of course, I didn't send him an email that was like, hello, sir. I just was like, I mean, I fell in love with him and then I fell in love with Rattle as two separate things kind of at the same
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
and then, yeah, but then the Poets Respond thing happened because I saw the opportunity to get into Rattle as like clearly that was going to be the easiest way because you could get an immediate response time almost, submit it by Friday, get a response by Saturday morning. I was going to submit 3 poems a week, and I figured if I was an average poet, I should definitely be in by a year and a half. And in fact, I got lucky and somewhat, I picked, but again, this is my gaming mindset coming out of poker. So I also looked at it and I was like, I have a much better chance if I write about an off-topic story
Yeah, yeah.
because I will have far less competition. So I wrote about the economy because I could tell nobody wants to write a poem about the economy and managed to get in.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. No, it's yeah. I'm not a big romantic, but there is something sort of sweet about like the sort of like you had an admiration of him from a distance, but then before you then developed a personal relationship, you had this moment of his approving of your work as well. That there's a kind of a
yeah,
share, like a mutual admiration or approval,
yeah,
as an invitation.
it was pretty amazing. And I mean, just, for my happiness of poetry in that moment to be accepted the first week I submitted to Rattle was like huge in terms of like I had mega imposter syndrome. Like I don't think, I'm good enough as a poet because, I was coming out of an unhealthy marriage and
Yeah, yeah.
really not feeling great about myself on many levels. So to have that and then what happened was I had no publication credits to list in my little bio. Unbeknownst to me, at Rattle, the best thing you can say is I have never been published. Like that's what makes me the most excited is that
Yeah,
this
yeah,
could be
yeah.
your. But anyway, so I put NFTs in the bottom and talked a little bit about NFTs, and it turned out that Tim was looking for a new topic for a tribute section, so a new like little subset of
Oh, okay.
poetry, and so that was how we started like, then he asked me about that after that, and so then
Oh,
then we started emailing and stuff about at first about NFTs, so alternate publishing. But yeah, I did fall in love with seeing him on the Rattlecast, so I'm sorry that that's the mushiest
no,
thing in the
yeah,
world, and he
that's
had no idea I existed.
yeah, no. I think like some, I think like Alice has maybe had like less than charming experiences with parasocial relationships. So that's a nice heartwarming one.
Oh, good. I'm
Yeah,
glad to hear.
yeah, turned out well. Yeah, at some point I'll have to dig into. You're much more tech savvy than I am, and that's clearly like a whole part of your basis of real expertise. But yeah, at some point we'll have to dig into AI stuff because I'm so I don't know if I even count as a Luddite. I'm just I get the heebie-jeebies around the whole thing. But I was provoked and intrigued and sort of charmed by your extremely like bomb throwing comment about Anne Carson writing a poem worse than an AI poem, which I have to say, it really was. It really, like, whatever,
Right.
what I might have had qualms with how you went about it, but I think finally, like, it's like both accurate and fair game. But yeah, well, I would love to dig into AI stuff with
We
you at
can
some
we
point
can
because
talk
I'm
for
curious.
another few minutes actually
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah.
I have to
I,
leave in 10 minutes to pick up my daughter, and that's why I said that time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so creeped out and weirded out and try as much as possible to have nothing to do with AI. Again, AI meaning, as Ethan's pointed out, like what we call AI right now is like
Right.
natural language processing,
Hmm.
large language model. Like it's a
Hmm.
specific thing that's not,
Right.
AI could have a very broad or very narrow
Right.
definition. But the
Right.
thing we call AI now, the chat GPT
Yeah.
variety of AI,
Hmm.
yeah, I recoil from it, but I also recognize that it's like video games. I don't recoil from video games, but I'm totally ignorant of them. And yet I recognize there's
Right.
something significant happening there.
Yeah, I think with that, part of why I'm trying to embrace it as much as I am, it's just that it takes me back to so when I was playing professional poker, I was playing online, right? And there was
Yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
moment when people started creating bots or started
Hmm.
creating all these advanced spreadsheets, and I was just like, I have to stay on top of this, or else I'm going to, be out of a job, basically. And so that was part of it. But the way I see it with AI, like it's going to happen. It's just a matter of how we choose to adjust to it. Like us ignoring it is not going to make it go away. So I try to find ways to use ChatGPT for good. One such way, having turned off its ability to save my information, by the way, so
Okay.
this is not feeding the program, which I
Right.
think is an important thing to do for everybody. But like I have, if there's a line that I'm having trouble scanning or like I don't, it can actually do scansion, for
Okay.
example. Like you could ask
Okay.
it for that. Like there are little things it can do or like that are really helpful. And I think that I think we have to look for ways to try to embrace it. I will say too that I think actually poetry is the most safe.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm that's an uncommon opinion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like Tim
Well,
doesn't
there's
I
the
don't
there's
think
the there's the smallest financial motive to
yeah,
yeah
there's
to
the
develop
smallest financial.
technology to
Yes,
right.
there is. And then if large language models are about finding what we know more easily, like poetry is about exploring what we don't and sort of existing in this realm where we're okay being surprised and doing
Yeah,
that. So
yeah.
I think poetry is like the antidote to so much of what's wrong with today, and it's why I feel the most hopeful and why I think it's so important that we try to write the best poems possible because I think we have an opportunity here, to be the exact opposite of what most of the writing is about to become. But it's scary to go onto your email and have it suggest to write an
Oh
email.
my God, tab to
Like,
improve.
I
Just
know.
ugh, makes my
Yeah.
skin crawl.
I know it's creepy, right? Like
Yeah.
it really is creepy. And yeah, I don't know, but I do think that if used correctly, it can make the best writers better and that human writers will be better because the truth is, I think the best, most engaging writing is not perfect because if it's completely perfect, it can be off-putting, right? And
Mhm.
so I don't think we necessarily even want that. I love it when I get a submission that's a poem that's just a brilliant poem and it has like a really obvious typo where I'm like, oh, wow, this fucker wrote this fast. Like, wow, that's even more impressive
But
to me, you
but
know?
I think this is also changing in that like I thought when suits started being made mass produced in a way that
Yeah.
they hadn't been before, they were always kind of made by hand. It
Uh-huh.
became fashionable for people who had bespoke suits to leave some of the buttons on their sleeve unbuttoned
My God, I
because
love that
the point
information.
was to show it's like a small flaw, but the goal was to show that you could unbutton it, meaning that it was handmade, which you couldn't do
I
with mass
love
produced suits.
that.
And I think typos are now becoming that. It's like, no, an AI didn't write this. A human
Right.
wrote it with a little, and like you leave the typo in for
Right.
authenticity's sake.
Yeah. That's a good point. That is
Yeah.
really interesting. I wonder if that will. I love that as a metaphor though. Wow, that's really cool. I am sad that bespoke suits are gone though.
They're not gone. They're just well. And the other
They're-
thing is that now like higher end ready to ready to wear suits also now have functional buttons, right? So like eventually AI will start replicating typos, right?
Uh-huh.
If that becomes so, and this is maybe because you also come from gaming. I don't come from gaming, but I play chess,
Hmm.
and with poker and chess, AI like has clear measurable contributions to make. Like
Yes.
you would be a fool not to use AI as a chess player or presumably as a poker player today. That there are
Yeah.
things that there are ways in which they can make the game better.
Yes.
The thing I have yet to see in a clear way with poetry, because you have like outcomes in chess
Hmm.
or in poker. You can say like,
Hmm.
well, this you won or you lost,
Right.
right? And so, or you won or you lost against a stronger or a weaker player.
Right.
And it feels like part of the reason that the AI poetry I've seen for the most part has been sort of unremarkable. Like it reads as like plausible human poetry. Like I could believe a human would write
Right.
this,
Right.
but I
Right.
seldom see it. I haven't seen it do things human poetry hasn't done before, and I think it's partly because it's harder to set a standard for what success looks like.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you have
That's
a sense
true.
of what that might be? Like how you would, if you were to, not that we want to help AI programmers write, but like,
Right. Right.
what would it mean to say, like, you should aim for this goal as a
Right.
program?
Well, see, and that gets back to the question of like, what we were talking about before with the percent objective or subjective good poetry
Right,
is.
right, right.
And for me, the best AI poems I've seen, because I looked a little bit on Reddit with people talking about AI poetry and like
Hmm.
things, is you would say, you would give it a prompt, right? And the prompt would be something like, write a poem that's under a page that includes a lot of tactile details and explores a lot of sense, that has music in it to read,
Hmm.
and has a clear direction or action taking place. It tells a story, something like that. And do you know why that poem put into ChatGPT that comes out would be better than an average submission?
They don't bother
It's
to do any
serious.
of
I'm
those
sorry. It's the
things.
case. It would be because I approached it with like my basic tool set of this is how a poem is written, not
Yeah,
I am going to vomit my feelings onto this page and
right.
force someone else to read it. You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean? Like
yeah.
they're and those are the kinds of things where like when we read poetry, what we're really doing is contributing to our own large language model so that when we put out poems, it's with this wealth of information. And in that way, of course, every poem is an after poem, to get back to Ethan's point earlier too,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but in a broad sense of I am contributing to my moment in time where I get to add to this conversation that will hopefully continue on long beyond me, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. So maybe if there is a certain je ne sais quoi to poetry that LLMs will never solve,
Hmm.
I can't. I have to confess, I'm still not sold on them. But if there were a service they were going to perform for poetry, maybe it would be identifying the say quoi portion of poetry,
Right,
right?
right,
Like there's
right.
just say quoi. Like
Yeah,
it's like at least this part we can kind of identify that what
right,
competence means, even if
right.
it's separate from what magic
Right.
means.
Right. And I mean, poetry is also storytelling in my view, right? And there are tools to that in any artistic medium. There are specific ways that are best that you can best tell a story in a movie, but they have a lot more feedback from that because they get the instant, did people actually go see this movie or not? And that's part of why in poetry, we need to stop pretending that poems that suck are good just because our friend wrote them and it's awkward. Like we need to stop doing it. It's not in the service. It's a high time preference decision to say to somebody like, "Oh yes, your poem was amazing," when they're not reading, they're not doing anything but, doing a show and tell for elementary school in their midlife.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
we have some work to do, I'd say. And that Ann Carson thing that I made the comment on, man, I got some heat for that. It was
Yeah,
rough.
yeah, yeah,
I got someone on Twitter said I should go to jail for saying.
yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad you care that much. Thank you for
Yeah,
caring.
yeah, yeah. Also, it just seems so strange to like on behalf of Ann Carson,
I know.
yeah. If you love Ann Carson, it's not like that comment harmed her in any way,
I know. The truth is though too, I had a very meteoric rise in poetry, which doesn't really seem that big a deal to me because it's how I function. You know, it's how I was in poker. I throw myself into everything, right? But it pisses people off sometimes. And then, I've sent a lot of rejections. So,
Yeah.
they're usually too when somebody makes a really jerky comment on one of my posts, it's like in the back of my head, I know it's like, yeah, and I just sent you the rejection yesterday. What a coincidence. But of course, you know. So there are always the stories out there and then the stories behind the scenes, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I reject your comment. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's an opportunity to reject the rejecter. It's hard to. Yeah, I can sympathize with that. Go check out All That Glitter from the Poetry Box. I will put a link in the show notes. I am at some point going to try to get both Tim and Katie on the show, and I'm going to be doing a Rattlecast episode coming up. But I was glad to get this chance actually just to record a little something with Katie. Go check out The Secret Show at SLEERICKETS.substack.com. Put your email address in, and I will give you a week's access for free. After that, it's really cheap. In fact, it's so cheap that if you feel like giving the show a little extra support, you can become a founding member, which I affectionately call Motherfucker of the Arts. But if you don't like, if you're not a four-letter word kind of person, then you can call yourself whatever you like. If you would really like to listen, but you have a hard time paying for it, then just write me an email at sleerickets@gmail.com and I will hook you up. In addition to getting an extra episode every week, you will also be able to submit poems for listener crit episodes. We are overdue and we've got a couple few of those coming up. Thank you all for listening, and with any luck, I will be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.